Good evening, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm just pausing a moment because I've got a bit of bounce back. Try it now. Thank you very much. Before we start the meeting, I'll just read out the webcasting introduction. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or another use by such third parties. Therefore, by entering the conference suite and using the seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. So, as I say, welcome to this meeting. This is an extra meeting that has been put into the calendar to accommodate originally 2 items that were coming to us from Qualis. Now, I'm sure and I hope that all members have picked up the fact that we now have an other item, a supplementary agenda item, referring to town centre regeneration. So, as I say, I hope that all members have managed to read that document and have picked it up. So if we now move on to apologies for absence.
I've received apologies from Councillors Plummer and Williamson.
Thank you. And any substitute members?
I have Councillor Heap substituting for Councillor Plummer.
Thank you. The item on the minutes, it's just to note that the fact that the minutes of the meeting that was held last week on the 3rd of June will be confirmed at the next calendared meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 1st of July. Have we any declarations of interest? Councillor Whitehouse?
It's not a declaration of interest, it's a request. Are there any paper copies of that agenda available as there were last time? Because I don't have it.
No, there aren't, because it went out very late, I'm afraid, Councillor.
It was a very late supplementary agenda, which only came out fairly late on Friday afternoon, and I understand that there just wasn't time to get printed copies done for members.
No, but last time they were available for us when we arrived, weren't they? Last meeting, when we had a very late supplementary. Yeah, no,
unfortunately this hasn't been possible this time, as I understand it. Councillor Hadley?
Item 9 was originally supposed to go to the Stronger Council meeting, but because the schedule has been put back here, I'm a member of the Audit and Governance Committee, and I'm not allowed to be on the Stronger Council Committee. So is there a ruling here to say that I can either stay or just act as an observer with no voting powers, etc.?
Take advice on that. No issue with staying in the meeting, but not to take part in any of the discussion. Is that as I understood it?
My mic's not working. Someone's got the mic. Sorry, bit of confusion there. This is not a decision-making committee. We are just examining the report in front of us. So even though you're on the audit and governance, I don't think it actually matters because we're not going to take a vote or change the report.
So, comfortable with that, Councillor Hadley? Yeah, you're comfortable with that? Yeah. Councillor Murray?
Yes, I think I should declare a non-prejudicial interest in 9A, the Broadway and the High Road, on the basis of how the report and recommendations are drafted. I'm an elected member of Loughton Town Council.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other indication. Oh, Councillor Heap.
Thank you. Following on from that, I'm also on the Bucketstill Parish Council, so I should declare that, and on the Audit and Governance.
Thank you very much. Okay. If we now move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is public questions and requests to address the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As I understand it, we have had no requests.
No.
Thank you. And agenda item 7, executive decision call-ins. Again,
No call-ins, Chairman.
thank you very much. So we move on to the first substantive item of the agenda, which is agenda item 8, the sale of Pearls Lane site to Qualis. And you'll find that on pages 5 to 10 of the agenda. And I'm just, Andrew, you're introducing it first of all. Can I just make one comment before we start, that members who may find themselves sitting on any future planning committees where anything might come up from this site need to be aware that they should avoid prejudicing their any future meetings that they may attend for planning on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report presents the Pearls Lane sale. So when Qualis was originally created back in 2019, it was created with the intention of dealing with a number of sites that the council had surplus and thought suitable for redevelopment, but which the market was unwilling or unable to deal with. So at that point in time, the council transferred across a number of sites in Epping and Roundhills in Northam Abbey. But it didn't transfer across Pearls Lane, although that was one of the original list of sites to consider, because of particular site conditions that made that site more difficult than the other ones. So it was held in abeyance, and Qualis were given more time to consider what options might exist for that site. They've now reached a position where they can start thinking about Pearls Lane in more detail. And they have, or their board considered a report on potential options for redeveloping that site. And they have shared it with this council in light of our members' interests around the nature of development on that site. And so wanted to share the report and ask for views about the proposals contained therein, not specifically planning conditions, but more about the use of the site. I expect when Qualis are clear exactly about how they plan to develop that site, they will have to present it to Epping Forest District Council in terms of a request to buy it from the council, but they'll probably also be looking for development finance as well. That's not at this point in time. This is to help them define the business case that they wish to present to the council in due course. So it will come back again at a future date with a business case. But for now, this is asking for the committee's views about how that site could be used. We have Sasha Jevons and Simon Rutter from Qualis here today. I propose to hand over to them to add anything or present anything about the proposals that they wish to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you and good evening all. As Andrew says, I'm Simon Rutter, I'm Development Director in Qualis Commercial. I think the paper hopefully was presented to our board as an update note really in terms of the information we have today on the site and having scrutinised it for the last 6 months or so. I'm happy to take the report in its stages, but I'm sure if I start at the beginning, I'll run through it quickly and then everybody can ask any questions. So the background to the report obviously comes, the site is an allocated site in the local plan, hopefully soon to be adopted. The original scheme, which did get game planning consent, was back in 2016. I'm sure members will remember that was for a range of 36 flats and houses. And so the proposal that you see before you at the moment, which has, at the moment it's only been through a pre-application in terms of the local planning authority and no further than that, is for 33 houses, 35 car parking spaces, but I would hasten to add that this is still on the drawing board, and we are live to some of the issues and questions that we've had about parking, number of spaces generally. Some of you will know that we've also just been out to public consultation at Round Hills, and a scheme of a similar number of houses has obviously had a number of comments in terms of car parking. So there is a takeaway from not just this scheme from elsewhere in terms of what we may or may not do moving forward with car parking numbers. Obviously the scheme will have an element of affordable housing. The key aspect that comes out of this report is, unfortunately, I think the original scheme that was consented did have this narrow access from Pearls Lane into the site, and therefore the bulk of this information in this report really is about creating a suitable access that could facilitate the development and does, in this sense, require the acquisition of 79 Pearls Lane, and also some back garden land for a couple of other properties to allow a suitable, sufficient access to be gained. The scheme that you see here, as I say, is pre-application, as are the sketches in terms of the aerial photograph and certainly the elevational sketches. We were really just trying to give a flavour of what the proposition might look like going forwards. Timescales were originally, we were going to take this to our full business case to our June Qualis board. That is unlikely now because the valuations that are required for the land acquisitions, which are being undertaken by EFDC and particularly Savills, are not due to be completed until the 2nd of July. So the update to this report is those valuations will be complete by the 2nd of July. That will then allow us to look at what those mean in terms of the viability of the scheme and generally in terms of the formal offer to EFDC. We do have QRP booked in for the 6th of August, which is obviously the Quality Review Panel, as I'm sure you're aware, and provisionally at the moment we're still talking about public consultation in mid to the end of September. So the valuation exercise can carry ahead and will allow us, hopefully within those other timescales, to provide some more certainty around the financial offer for the site.
Apologies, Mr. Rutter. Can I just pause you for one moment? I've been asked if anybody in this room owns a car registration PA11LTM, which we gather is blocking somebody getting in or out of the building at the moment. So I'm told. Apologies for that interruption.
No problem. So in summary, this is an outline proposal which we need to now focus on the detail, but more than happy to answer any questions, any queries that anybody's got in terms of what you see before you tonight. Thank you.
Sasha, did you want to add anything?
No, that's fine. I've got nothing to add, thanks.
Thank you very much. And we do have some members who wish to either ask questions or make comments on the paperwork. Councillor Murray, and I've got Councillor Lyon and Councillor Wixley.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. An important site in Loughton, so I've read this item carefully and thought about it carefully. I'm quite sceptical about selling it to Qualis, but my comments are going to be based on the assumption that that's probably going to happen if all the right boxes are ticked, given the direction of travel that the council has taken previously. So I'm going to make my remarks within that acceptance, even though I'm not particularly happy with that idea. I was really pleased to read, it's an obvious statement, but it's really important to highlight what is contained in para 1.5. It's absolutely right that Epping Forest District Council, as the shareholder, will want to see the financial model and risk register associated with this site before the Cabinet considers any application for acquisition. So I did think it was worth highlighting that. And I know that the Leader of Council will ensure that that does happen. That's really important. I am only a teacher by profession, Chairman, not a land expert or a legal expert. But in paragraph 1.6, I would much prefer to have read the word proper market value rather than fair market value. It might be splitting hairs, but I think fair market value kind of is open to more negotiation. I just think it should take place at proper market value, would be my preferred wording. I'm conscious that we're not sitting as a planning committee, and equally I'm conscious that it might come to Plan South, so I will be careful in my remarks. But I think you're asking for some indicative kind of comments. If planning permission is going to be, if this land is going to be sold to Qualis and planning permission is going to be sought, then I think the number of properties is about the right ballpark and in line with some earlier applications. I think it is right not to see flats and multi-storey buildings on this site. I think that's an important principle. One concern I do have, because this is not a town centre site, public transport links aren't great. It's a considerable walk to either tube stations, so I do think there's an argument for proper, adequate parking, which isn't contained within the report I've seen. And then the one real concern I have, and there probably isn't an answer, or well, there might be an answer, and if I can hear it tonight, I would be delighted. If the Cabinet did sell this, and I think that's the likely direction to travel, if what is contained within 0.1, 0.5, they're satisfied about that, what is there to actually stop Qualis from putting in a completely different application? Like some of the stuff we've seen in Epping, and I won't comment about those because I don't comment on other people's misery. But what would, so EFDC as a major shareholder decides to sell the land, presumably that can't be tied directly to a planning application. So what is to actually stop Qualis as the then landholder putting in a completely different type of application? I would like an answer to that, please, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Phillip, I gather that you're here as the portfolio holder. At this point in time, the committee is discussing and considering to pass on things to the Cabinet. Do you want to wait until you've heard all the comments and then have an opportunity to come in?
To be fair, Chairman, I probably won't remember them all, given the number of people you've got to speak. I was just going to answer a couple of Councillor Murray's questions, if I might, and then that will help to move it on. Fair market value, Councillor Murray, is a recognised term for the correct transfer price. So I'm quite comfortable with the fair market value, but I would completely echo your comments around seeing a proper business case and risk register. That will fold into the overall Qualis business case that we see going forward, and you will see, I think it is in July, in terms of the 4-year business plan. If Qualis were to choose to do something entirely different from what drives the business case, it would need to be a better business case than what we agreed to from a transfer point of view. I don't think it's Cabinet's position to make significant decisions on the appropriateness of things from a planning point of view. That's why we've got planning committees there to make those decisions, and it would seem strange that if we were to sell the land to Qualis and the planning committee was to request a change, to some degree of change to that application, that it would have to come back to Cabinet. I don't see that being the way it would work. So it's a combination, Councillor Murray, of making sure that we transfer it on the proper business case, and then our planning committees do what our planning committees should do and look at the right aspects. And I note that my planning portfolio holder colleague is not here tonight, so I just remind him that we do need to follow the things in our local plan which are looking for us to reduce the amount of car travel that we have within the district, particularly when you're in proximity to the forest, to protect that special area of conservation. And that's clearly part of what we would need to look at going forwards. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, thank you for that. If I can, Councillor Lyon.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I've read this. It's quite interesting, but it's quite short in detail, and from a scrutiny point of view, yes, we can discuss it, but I don't think we can really get in behind this, so obviously waiting for a proper business case. A couple of comments, though. This was originally, I think, went to Plan South as the garage sites. I believe that was true, and the access was through 107, 108. Is that?
I'm seeing a shaking of head from one member of Plan South, but
No?
I'm,
Okay.
I think you take it at that level, but we're not getting an absolute answer.
Okay. The other question was related to affordable housing. I just wanted to know whether affordable housing was in addition to these numbers or would be included within these numbers.
Thank you. Mr. Rutter?
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, these are total numbers of units in terms of 33 houses, so the affordable housing will be a percentage of those units.
Oh, yeah, one further question was the dates in the timeline. May, so I presume the land values have now been secured, and the other dates, June and July, are they robust, or will they change?
Okay. Unfortunately, the land valuations have taken longer, so the Savills, on behalf of EFDC, have committed to providing those valuations by the 2nd of July. So, unfortunately, everything else is dependent on those because it is the primary value of the access portions of the site. So, we will need to move those dates on forwards, but encouraged by, let's say, the pre-application advice, we will probably keep the scheme moving forward to talk to the quality review panel in August. So once those valuations are in place, I'll have a better idea of actual timescales.
Thank you for that. Can I just, following on from the question around affordable housing, what percentage of the total are you looking at as being affordable?
At the moment, that's something that will come out of the viability assessment, which we will do as part of the assessment we will produce going forwards. The site, as I'm sure you all know, is quite a complicated site to develop. It has a 14-metre fall across it, so it does have some quite expensive development constraints to it. Obviously, policy is 40%, which is where we will aim, but it will be a factor of the other aspects of the affordability and the viability of the site coming out of the other elements.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wixley?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Before I start, I'd have to say I'm coming at this perhaps from a slightly different angle because I'm a ward councillor for Fairmead Ward, which is where the site is. So just to correct a couple of things which have been said previously, this wasn't a garage site, it was actually the council's Pearls Lane nursery site. That's what it was previously. On the basis of the number of houses that are proposed, and this is just an outline plan, I don't believe that it will go to Plan South because it's above, I think, the threshold of 10. But I think Adrian probably knows more about the Constitution. He's shaking his head, but I think I'm probably right in that respect that anything above 10 on a development site goes straight to the District Development Committee. My understanding is that it will go to the Town Council for their comments. So I just sort of make those points. I have to say, this site, there's been ongoing issues with it for a number of years, and probably going back almost 10 years when it was, I think, first disposed of, and there were talks then about what to do with the site. The then portfolio holder, it was Gagan Mahindra, said that he would keep me informed of any developments. I have to say I've been quite disappointed since, because I've often found things out after they've happened or when they've appeared on an agenda. And I have asked at several meetings that ward councillors be kept informed. and residents as well. And I'm particularly concerned about the residents who back onto this site, especially as one told me the other day, when I felt obliged to mention this meeting to her, that she'd already heard something because of a press release. Well, I've certainly not seen a press release. I don't know if one was issued or if that's a misunderstanding of some sort. However, I don't want to dwell on the lack of communication issue, because there was a more positive move in this direction yesterday when I had a phone call from Simon Rutter, who's here tonight. So it's actually nice to meet him in person, almost, to some distance apart. So I felt we had a very good conversation yesterday. It lasted for about 40 minutes. I don't want to repeat all that was said yesterday. Simon will know that and I hope other councillors will understand this, that my biggest concern is for the impact on the residents that I represent, that whose properties back onto this site, and there's quite a lot of them. And when you get to know your residents, when you've been a councillor for some years and you get to know people and their circumstances, you do feel for them when a development of this sort comes up, and it's going to be life-changing in some respects. So that's really the main angle which I'm coming from. I'm particularly concerned about the resident who lives at number 77, because 79, the other half of the semi-detached properties, is going to be demolished. That's obviously going to cause a lot of disruption to her. And in addition to that, because she will then be next to the entrance to this site, she's obviously going to get disturbed by incoming and outgoing traffic from the site. Number 81, I don't really know too much about that, but I understand that there's some land that the Qualis want to purchase from there. Another issue where I'm concerned for my residents is that because this was a nursery and it's got some large trees in it, I think it was almost an annual event that some of these trees would overgrow into the back gardens of residents that back onto the site, and the council would go along and trim those trees back. I don't know what's going to happen with that in the future if that becomes somebody's back garden and they've got the freehold. I can see problems for residents there. A further issue which I should mention is that there's a water supply which comes from this site and goes to an allotment site which belongs to the town council. That allotment site is now occupied by a group called Grow, which is a community garden. And I understand that there was a suggestion at one time that supply would be cut off. So I'm asking, and I've already discussed this with Simon, I've discussed it with the town clerk at Loughton Town Council, that whatever happens, that supply will be preserved. Looking at the drawings, I think they're very indicative that there aren't any measurements on them. I think possibly the last drawing, which is on page 10, is quite deceiving in fact that it probably makes the area look much bigger than it really is. But it's very difficult to view this site unless you're actually in the site. You can't see much from the outside. So I think if ever this gets to a planning committee, the case for a site visit beforehand would be extremely strong. Just going back a bit further on some points I would like to make, and I must be wary not to fetter my discretion. I'm not on the District Development Management Committee, but any comments I do make about the indicative plans are not final. They would be subject to whatever happens when the planning permission comes forward. So I would reserve my final judgment for such an event. I think I do have a concern about the density of the number of properties on the site, which restricts the number of parking places. The whole area is quite heavily parked. Pearls Lane itself is a very busy road. And I'm also still concerned about the access, because I've this site is on a bend, and probably councillors probably don't realise it's quite a sharp bend, so the sight lines are very restricted. And I'd be very wary of turning right when coming out of this site. There's evidence of this. There's a concealed entrance sign, but this often gets covered over with vegetation. And I drove along there today, and sure enough, you can't see the concealed entrance sign. So there's no warning that there is an entrance coming up. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed perhaps as soon as possible. I think it's already mentioned about the bus service and hence the need for people to use cars, the distance from the stations. I think the 167 bus route, which used to run along there, I'm told it no longer does. There's a special area conservation issues and air quality. And I think that's more or less the best I can say at the moment. I do have some questions, actually, if maybe they could be answered. And there's reference to 3 additional portions of land. I think there's reference to 79 Pearls Lane and that house being demolished. And it says there's a need to acquire 3 additional portions of land from EFDC, including a section of the rear garden of number 81. So I'm just wondering where these other 2 sections are. It'd be interesting to know that. I think that's probably about as much as I can say, but if those questions could be answered on where the additional land is going to be purchased, and also the form of consultation which Simon mentioned earlier, I'd be interested to know how that's going to work. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Wixley. I think you did have a specific question within there, so perhaps I could ask Mr Rutter to answer that first of all, and then I'll come to Councillor Phillip.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Councillor Wixley. I think the specific question is about 3 portions of land. Just to be a bit more specific, so on the triangle that is the access road, obviously where the road is shown at the moment, that is 79, which is demolished. There's a triangle of land next to 79 that used to have a small pump station. It's got a small brick building on it at the moment. That's one of the portions. There's the rear garden to 81 Pearls Lane, which is, I suppose, the easiest way of describing it is there is where the road narrows, there is a circle which is a tree. That's 81. The plot of land next to it is owned by EFDC as well. So we need a small strip from both of those gardens and the triangle which has got the small pump station on it, and that's the additional 3 portions we talk about in this report. I think when we get together, obviously we'll, as we talked about, I can take you through a bit more of that detail.
Yeah, the other question I asked Simon was about the consultation and what form that would take, how that would work.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of different streams of consultation. Obviously, once our plans are a little bit more developed, we will come and talk to you as local councillors before anything goes back out into the public domain. The way our consultation events are working and what we've just done at Round Hills is there's a multitude of ways which we consult. We've written letters to all the surrounding streets so that they're aware of the proposals that are coming forward. We have a website which hosts all of the images that we would normally in the old days put in a public consultation event. So that is online. It allows people to register, comment, and we found that a really powerful platform actually for Round Hills. Also, I think by the time this comes forward, so we are talking about September, let's hope the world's a different place, and therefore we would do an open event, maybe in the town council's offices or somewhere locally, so people can come in and talk to me and talk to the team about what the scheme looks like. So with that and all of that platform, we are finding really good levels of response, and it is quite accessible for lots of people to respond. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Phillip, you indicated you'd like to add something?
Councillor Wixley started off by questioning where this application would go, and it depends at that point whether it's a parcel of land still owned by the council or whether we've carried out the land transfer beforehand. If it's still owned by the council, then yes, more than 10 houses would go to DDMC. If it's no longer owned by the council, then it would not go to DDMC. I think the other thing is to remember the purpose of the item on your agenda tonight, which is to give us as the Cabinet clear steer what we should be looking at when an acquisition business case comes towards us. Some of the points I think Councillor Wixley made are appropriate to that. Some of them I think sit very much more in the planning domain, and we have to be really careful not to stray into there.
Thank you for that. Can I just clarify? You're saying which committee it might go to. Even though EFDC is the sole shareholder, would it still be considered as being something that could go just to Plan South?
The way that the Constitution is written is that it's any major application defined below where the council is the landowner. So if we were not the landowner, we would not be, it would not fall in under that one, and therefore would be under the large-scale application, which is a 200 house situation. It could be that the Director of Planning chooses this to be something that is sufficient importance to go to DDMC rather than Plan South, but it doesn't, I think, fall under any of the other specific exclusions to send it straight to DDMC. And that would depend, as I say, on the date of the transfer of the land.
Thank you. Councillor Councillor Jennings.
Better known as Thank you, Chairman. In the event that this site is sold on to Qualis, and for whatever reason Qualis later determines not to develop it, would the site be returned to the council, or would it be allowed to sell it on to a third party?
A transfer has taken place to Qualis. Qualis then has the asset to do with as Qualis desires, but in line with their 1-year and 4-year business plan. So clearly development here is something that is important. If we do a transfer, if we sell the land to Qualis, then they've purchased it. It could be at that point, if the development doesn't go ahead, then Mr. Small, in conjunction with myself as the client side of Qualis, would be looking to get the land back. I think the underlying thing here is that the land is an asset that we have as the council. It's our duty to get best value for it. Doing that development through Qualis is probably the best way of doing it, because we will see margin on any construction loans that we see to Qualis. Qualis, if they make a profit, that is something that can either be retained within Qualis to do further development or to feed back to the council in terms of a dividend. Qualis is not going to want to have a useless asset sitting on its hands. They are a developer in the end. Developers develop sites. They also take them through planning and get to a point where they choose the best way of maximising the investment is to sell that on with the planning permission. Any other developer would have to meet that planning permission or come back for further planning to the council. We would be looking at making sure that the benefit to us and to our residents is the maximum.
Thank you for that. Mr. Small, you wanted to...
Thank you, Chair. It's just for information for the committee. In terms of the Epping sites, we did put a clause into the sale agreement that if the sites weren't developed within 5 years and they were returned to the council, it's something that Cabinet may wish to consider in terms of this disposal. But I am aware that the council has tried to sell the Pearlslade site before and has been unsuccessful, as the market's not particularly interested in it. So that might equally weigh in Cabinet's consideration.
Thank you for that. Councillor Rackham.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a bit more detail about the affordable housing. It would be good to get a number of how many units there's going to be, and also what sort of units within the development will they be. And my other question was about what sort of consultation goes on with the residents that are going to be directly affected? So number 79 and the other 2 or 3 residents that will lose part of their garden, I would imagine. Thank you.
Mr. Rutter, are you going to take that?
Yeah, certainly. Again, I think in terms of the affordable housing numbers, at the moment we haven't finished that exercise. So it will form part of the viability exercise that we come forward with. But in real terms, the units will be within the configuration of the site. I mean, as I'm sure you know, that they're termed as tenure blind, so that you won't be able to tell which is an affordable unit and which is an open market sale unit. So in terms of spaces and external areas and what they look like, they'll all be the same. In terms of direct consultation, at the moment the land acquisitions or the valuations are being done by EFDC, and they're having those direct conversations with the landowners of 81. I did talk to Councillor Wixley about how we liaise with the owner in 77, who's most affected, because 79 is vacant at the moment. We need to work through how we do that sensitively because of the impact. Once we're fully assured of what the access arrangements look like, what protection we can give the property in the interim stage and as a result of the scheme coming forward. So there's a little bit more work to do in terms of the direct impact of the lady who is in 77.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Baldwin.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just short question, brief question. I know sometimes that the City of London Corporation are interested in acquiring buffer land close to the forest, and I know that on Hillyfields that they do already own a section of Hillyfields. I believe that's where they built the drainage facility there. I just wondered, has there been any approaches to the City of London Corporation with a view to selling the land to them? And I know obviously for the council it is important to have best value, and I believe you said that they've been trying to dispose of this site for 5 years. But I did wonder whether the City of London Corporation has expressed any interest in this, or any negotiations have taken place. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know who might know that. Sasha, you're...
As far as I'm concerned, no. I haven't had any negotiation with the City of London. This is, as I said earlier, this is an allocated site in the local plan with a residential allocation, and therefore that's why we're promoting it in the way we are promoting it. Okay.
Councillor Phillip, you wanted to add on to that?
Thank you, Chairman. If we go back, as the history has already been called out, this land was already offered for sale back in 2016. At that time, the City of London made no inquiry, as far as I'm aware, to acquire the site for their buffer land. Clearly, we want to make sure that we get best value. We're not just giving it to the City of London. We regularly meet with the City of London. I know the leader and the planning portfolio holder met with them about 2 months ago. Now, this wasn't one of the things that they've expressed an interest in acquiring. They know it's around. Part of the work that we do as a cabinet when this comes forward with business case, we'll see the numbers. If the City of London wants to come in with a better offer, then obviously we would listen to them.
Thank you very much. Councillor Heap.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just harking back to number 77, because all of the construction traffic is going to go past that house. So can't we give a guarantee that whatever damage is done to that is repaired soon?
Yeah, certainly, without a doubt. I mean, the way it will get dealt with is they're called a party wall award. So we'll survey before, we survey during, we'll look at impacts in terms of construction traffic and monitor throughout. So, yeah, without doubt, we will deal with any issues. I would hope there are none, but you can never be sure when you're obviously taking half a house down.
Thank you. And Councillor Hadley, you indicated that...
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that jumped out at me was the garden in number 81 and the word negotiation, which implies to me that one of the parties could say no. Is that a fact, or do we have, is that something which will happen regardless of their desires? Because that access is quite narrow, and if they were to say no, it could affect a lot of that plan.
Thank you for that question. Can I just, adding on to that, are these privately owned houses now, or are they houses that are still owned by EFDC Council Housing Stock?
In terms of ownership, 81 Pearls Lane was sold on a long lease in 1982. In honest answer, yes, they could say no. We have looked at a couple of alternative access options which rely on land that's solely owned by EFDC, but it doesn't provide as good a simpler access into the site. Obviously, we're promoting the site because it is allocated in the local plan as providing housing and local need. I think that's answered both questions, hasn't it? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barnett.
Thank you. This may be slightly premature, the question, but I just wanted to know, obviously, housing has a big part to play in terms of the reduction of carbon emissions. If all goes well, what safeguards could there or would there be to try and ensure that the carbon footprint of that site is kept as low as possible?
So what we look at in terms of the applications and the makeup of the applications is the sustainability criteria which is set out in EFDC policy. If I look at, just because this is further behind than Round Hills, if I look at what we've got in Round Hills, so on Round Hills we've got a number of environmental improvements in terms of ecology for bats, hedgehogs, green meadows. We look at thermal insulation. For Round Hills, we've got air source heat pumps, we've got PVs. So there's quite a comprehensive set of environmental and social criteria that we look as part of the application to meet the carbon agenda, which is part of EFDC policy.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we've probably had quite a full... Oh, Councillor Lyon, you wanted to come back quickly?
Yes, very quickly. 1.3, it says Quality has now started to focus on potential uses. Well, we've only seen one potential use. Has there been any other considerations that they might want to let us know about?
Mr. Rutter?
Certainly, I think that statement may have been relative to the typology of houses in themselves, i.e. 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 1-bedroom, rather than an alternative style use. But we're simply looking at residential on this site because of its allocation.
Thank you for that. And again, Councillor Phillip, a quick one, please.
Chairman, no, I was going to reassure Councillor Lyon that it is in the local plan for residential, and as far as I'm aware, there are no plans for a nuclear power station on this one.
Thank you very much for that final comment. Oh, Councillor Lee, again.
Yeah, could it just be made clear when John said about when it comes to like the planning decision, normally if it's over 10 houses it comes to DDMC, but it just sounded very vague, as if the officers was going to make the decision and it not come to a committee. And bear in mind the public are listening to this, so I would quite like it to be clear that the public know that people are going to look at it and discuss it and decide.
I think I can probably answer that one for Councillor Phillip myself and say that I don't think there is any question whatsoever of this being decided under officer delegated powers.
Perhaps for Councillor Lee, the bit I was referring to, an officer decision, was simply whether it stays with Plan South or comes to DDMC, if there is an option.
Thank you. And Councillor Murray, you wanted to come back as well?
Yes, Madam Chairman. On that particular issue, if the land has transferred to Qualis before the planning application, I think there'd be a considerable body of local opinion that it should go to Plan South. but we'll have that discussion when we need to have it.
Yeah, and I'm sure that would have been noted. Right, well, thank you very much. I think we have had a fairly full and quite strong questioning session on this. Obviously, it is going to go before Cabinet. I don't know whether in exactly the same form or whether it be a slightly different report. But as members of the Council as a whole, all members of this committee will also have the opportunity to go along to Cabinet if they wish to raise any other points, ask any other questions at that time. So that's something else to bear in mind as this moves forward. So thank you very much, and thank you very much to Sasha and Simon for that part of the evening. We now move on to agenda item 9, which is the Qualis Quarter Monitoring Report for Quarter 2, 2020-21. Yes, Mr. Small, I can pass this one over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report presents the Qualis second quarter monitoring report for their trading year 2021 and covers the period from 1st of February to 31st of March. You may notice that that is actually a 2-month period, and that's to do with Qualis change in accounting year end, which was agreed in the last monitoring report. So that the actual board report is attached as an appendix A to this report, and it reports on all the issues that the Council requires Qualis to report on. It also identifies any areas of concern according or measured against their own business plan using the standard red, amber, green rating system. Generally, the performance is good. There are a few issues identified as amber, but the majority are green, so I'm content with that. The few that are flagged as either amber or have changed in their status since the last report are identified in 3.5 to 3.7 within the report. So just briefly covering those, cash has moved to green from amber in the last reported quarter, and Qualis now has £15.5 million in the bank account, which is £3.2 million higher than its target. That's largely due to the first tranche of construction loan being agreed and paid to Qualis during that quarter. Qualis Living is now flagged as amber, and that's because it's still sat on £10 million at this moment in time, which is a considerable element of the £15 million cash balance that it holds. And it's sat on that as it tries to conclude its final commercial acquisition out of the 3 commercial acquisitions it was looking for from the £30 million that the Council paid to Qualis last September. I believe Qualis has now identified a suitable property and has made an offer on that one. So I expect that will be resolved before the next quarter end. Income and expenditure remains as amber. The board shows accumulated loss up to the end of quarter 2 of £473,000, which is higher than Qualis's own target of £197,000. But it is an improvement, I should say, on the last quarter when the reported loss at that point in time was £696,000. The reason, as set out in the board report, is to do with work in progress. So Qualis accumulates development costs associated with the Epping and Waltham Abbey site, and can only transfer those to its balance sheet as work in progress, as an asset, in fact, once planning permission has been agreed for those. And so it all depends upon obtaining a suitable planning permission for those sites, and that's now expected to be considered by the District Development Committee in July. The final one was to do with Round Hills in Waltham Abbey and Pearls Lane. We obviously just considered a report on Pearls Lane, and Round Hills is now moved to the consultation stage as well. So those schemes are moving forward. I think that covers all the points I'd like to make, Chair. With your permission, over to the committee for comments.
Thank you very much for that. So if I can go over to any members of the committee who've got any comments that they'd like to make or any actions that they've identified that they would like to raise. Councillor Hadley?
Thank you, Chair. On the cash side, Qualis has got £3.2 million more than expected. So presumably that's reinvested.
It's essentially the cash that is needed to run Qualis through to the end of the financial year, so it is as expected, so it's not reinvestable as such.
Okay. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think I've only got one question. 2.2 of the report clearly explains why we get the commentary, because that's required by the Council's S151. So I have one comment about the commentary, or one question. 3.2, para 3.2. The second year should be a balance of income and expenditure with a small forecast profit targeted within. You've got the sentence there. Why the word should? Why can't we be a little bit more confident than that?
I mean, the business plan anticipates making a profit in its second year of trading, I suppose, now, because nothing's certain until it's delivered. So it's just recognising that the uncertainty of life.
Thank you. Councillor Baldwin and then Councillor Wixley.
Yes, in terms of that, assets versus liabilities, I mean, I see Qualis as having really its income or its assets tend to be loans. It gets a bit complicated with accounting, doesn't it? But I'd like to see what are Qualis's assets, because obviously most of they took out a loan from Epping Forest District Council for 30 million, and that really, I believe, goes as a liability. I just want to know what actual tangible assets they have to offset these liabilities.
I'll answer that, but Nick Don might wish to come in. The tangible assets that Qualis holds at the moment are the two commercial assets that it acquired. So it has two assets on its books. It also obviously has the cash in bank, which is sort of more of a current asset, and will ultimately have work in progress as well on the balance sheet as an asset as well. And there are its main assets at this moment in time.
Mr. Daw, did you want to add anything?
That was totally complete.
Sorry, Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. My actual question was about assets as well. I wasn't sure. We've got assets, current assets and long-term assets, and I wasn't entirely clear on what the difference between them all was. I'm not an expert on accounts. I'm quite good with a piggy bank, but that's as far as it goes.
Thank you, Mr. Saul.
I can give you the technical accounting answer, but so a fixed asset or a long-term asset is anything that can't be liquidized within the space of a year. So cash usually counts as a current asset, whilst property is usually termed as fixed assets.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Have you got anybody else got any questions, comments, points to make on this? I'm not seeing any indication. Well, thank you very much. Again, this is an item which will be going to Cabinet, I presume, the next Cabinet meeting? Yes, so it will appear. So if anybody does have anything else that they think about over that time before that meeting, then they'll have the opportunity again to go to that meeting and make any other comments, ask any other questions. So thank you very much to Sasha and Simon for coming along this evening and answering the questions, taking up the comments that have been made. And thank you, and just happy for you to leave at this point in time. And I will just wait a moment to allow Mr. Houston and I believe it's Mr. Messenger who's going to come and sit at the table. Thank you very much. So we move on to supplementary agenda item, which is item number 9A. You have on that item a recommendation which is written in such a way that I did query it this morning. So the recommendation, which we'll now be following through, it should read, for the committee to consider and review the reports and express opinions around the immediate actions identified prior to consideration of this report by Cabinet. So if I can hand over, I'm not sure who's going to take it. I see Mr. Dorr is the senior leadership team officer. Are you going to start off, or is Mr. Houston going to start?
Your mic's still on.
Sorry, did I get the indication that Councillor Phillip wished to introduce?
Yes, I'm going to kick off if that's all right with you, Chairman, and then I'm going to hand over to Mr. Houston and Mr. Messenger to go into some of the details around where we've come from. I just want to set the context of these reports. It was my pleasure to bring the first two reports on town centres to Cabinet in the last council year, where we looked primarily at a number of things that we could do to kick-start the regeneration and return to something like normal life in a couple of our significant town centres. We're very lucky in this district, and also very challenged in this district, that we have more than one key town centre to actually focus around. And one of the pleasures actually of this district is that the various town centres are so different, and there isn't one plan that we can apply that looks at all of the town centres in exactly the same way. The key parts around this report, I think, are that we have looked at all these centres differently. We contracted with who was then an external consultant, Mr. Messenger, to do these reports, looking at it from a retail point of view in the town centres and what we might actually do to help those town centres forward. I think there's a number of important things to highlight before you get into the detail of the reports. Firstly, these reports were produced through the depth of our lockdown at the beginning of this year. We took it as a very important thing that we needed to move forward on this at a reasonable pace, which is why I was able to bring the reports in the last financial year for the two town centres. But to do that, we had to make sure that we took this at a level where we did a sampling of inputs from each area, and we couldn't be exhaustive, constrained as we were by lockdown. This is an opportunity for the members of the committee to make comments about these reports. These are not definitive lists of things that we're going to do. There are areas that have been identified as things that we should be looking at to move forward. I think it's probably fair to say we will not be doing everything that's in these reports. This is very much not a case of the district council doing things to town centres. This has to be a collaborative approach. Over the length of time, it has to be something that's driven from our businesses within the town centres, and there are ways that we might look at that going forward. We've looked at some of the sources of funding that we have available to make these happen. This is not an open-ended commitment from the district council to actually fund everything going forward. As I said, it has to be a partnership working. We need to do that. I want to make it clear that as a cabinet, when these come forward, we'll be looking very favourably, particularly at the things that can be done relatively quickly to improve the situation for our town centres. We have already had a significant number of successes in both Waltham Abbey and in Ongar in terms of actually taking actions on the various things that were called out in those reports. I'm happy to say I was meeting Mr. Messenger this morning at my regular economic development meeting, and he had to leave very promptly, but he was actually going to meet with the town group in Waltham Abbey, moving things forward. And I think that's the key about this. We don't want to spend a lot of time talking about things. We want to do things, and do things quickly, that help our town centres to improve and become better places. Longer term, and we need to look at longer term as well, but we need to do the longer term in conjunction with the other stakeholders in those towns, and particularly around the funding, looking for external funding, but also it has to be a real commitment from businesses. I think there's nothing as undervalued as something that appears to be free. We want people to buy into this, but they need to be willing to put their hands in the pocket as well. We will help, but we will not do everything. I think that sets the context for where these reports are coming from, and I'll hand over to John and Paul now to take the committee through some of the more detailed parts of these reports.
Right, thank you very much. Mr. Houston.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Phillip has set the wider context against which we produced this work, and at a time when we were working really hard to ease restrictions and get our town centres bouncing back into life, while our colleagues from Revs and Bends were pushing funding out from government to make sure our businesses could survive and be in a position where they could bounce back. And that work's all been going on while this work has been undertaken. Some insight into context. This area, as Councillor Phillip mentions, has 6 main market towns. That's an embarrassment of riches in terms of market towns, all with their own character, all with their own strengths and opportunities. Across those market towns, we have a really good level of independent variation in terms of the offer from the retail side, as well as strong offerings from hospitality. A lot of the areas that are being highlighted nationally as potentially areas that can go from strength to strength and may ride out some of the difficulties that I'm sure we all recognise our high streets are facing. The growth of online retail through the pandemic has been enormous and sustained, and that's going to make a major issue for our retailers who are doing bricks rather than clicks. The COVID epidemic has really impacted, as I'm sure you're all aware, on people's planning and the viabilities of shops in our area and on our high streets in particular. But currently we're experiencing pretty strong demand for units on our high streets. We are not at the level of vacancies, which is used as a general health indicator for high streets that is apparent in many other places. So we're starting from a reasonably strong base in our district, and the reports all reflect that. Paul's done an excellent piece of work in speaking to local people, but also bringing his own expertise into looking at those areas. So we're starting from a strong base, but I think when we did embark on this, there was a need to crack on with work. We were asked to get on with things rather than spend 2 years talking about them, but also then lay the foundations for how we might tackle the longer term structural issues that we need to get right for our town centres to continue to flourish and be vibrant. And I think the reports do both of those. I think it's fair to say that this is the beginning of a process rather than the end of a process. There's still an awful lot of work to go. And what we've produced and what Paul's produced is that independent outside perspective on where the opportunities are and some of the challenges facing each area. But core, like the DNA of this report, is that localist approach, that for us to be successful, we have to play to the strengths and character of each of our towns. Their individual characteristics are what will save them going forward. And we need to move from a situation where we're really heavily retail to a situation where people come for experiences and come to the town centres because it's somewhere they want to be, that there are attractions in their own right. And that's a difficult transformation. I think we'll probably be having these conversations for many years to come about how we manage that process going forward, and how we're delivering on behalf of our town centres. But as Councillor Philip mentioned, we are but one stakeholder, one partner in those town centres, and for us to fully deploy the opportunities in these reports, it will require the buy-in and active support, guidance and leadership of key people in all those town centres across our district. So in conclusion, rather than go through in detail every single report, because there's an awful lot there, as you can see, I've rarely produced a report or a group of reports with that many recommendations inherently in them. So it might take us a few hours just to go through the recommendations, but we're really happy for members to comment, give some insight, suggestions about the approach from here and how you'd like us to move forward in these things. If there's detailed questions, then we'll do our best to answer them. But I'd just like to thank Paul for the work he's done during the pandemic and getting out, and also all the members, some of them in the room tonight, who've taken time to speak to Paul, the businesses that have worked with Paul to bring forward these recommendations. It's been a real collective effort.
Thank you very much for that. Obviously, a lot in this report, and I'm sure members will be aware it was very late arriving, as I said earlier, a lot of pages to read, but having sort of started reading it myself and working my way through it, there's a lot of repetition in it anyway, so perhaps that makes it slightly easier to pick up the main points from it. If I can go to members for any comments, questions, starting with Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think this is a really detailed and interesting report. There's lots of good ideas, but many of them are untried and untested. It was mentioned that Waltham Abbey and Ongar are underway. Are there any learning points, any feedback from those two sites that we could build into here? Just on the point, the forward, localism, leadership and fewer cars, yes, wonderful ideals. Localism, we've had localism since 2011, at least since the Localism Act. And I think one of the things that is important to me is that we do things with, not to. So this is, I think Councillor Phillips made that point, that we are working with the town centres, with the retailers and the shopkeepers and various other entrepreneurs to actually make sure that we facilitate what they do. But I think my concern at this stage, and I think I echo your comment, Chairman, about the repetition, is have we proved the concept? Can we do something in a phased way rather than attacking all these high streets at the same time? And can we look at this to actually get some learning in place and build forward and try and do one thing at a time? It seems an awful lot to do at one point, and there's no sort of phase map on here, so it would be useful if this is going to go forward to get a map to say how these things are going to be phased and how our resources are going to be managed going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Phillip?
And thank you for your points, Councillor Lyon. I think it's really important that we actually move forward across all of our district promptly. We were able to start Ongar and Waltham Abbey previously. We had those reports in earlier. One of the reasons we employed Mr. Messenger as a town centre project manager was to make sure that we had resource within the council to actually oversee the scheduling of these. The aim with Paul's job is not to do everything, and that ties into your part about actually working as a partnership. And if there's something we have learnt already from Ongar and Waltham Abbey, it's that when we're actually doing positive things, people are willing to work with us to drive things forward. I think Paul might actually be able to say one or two things that we've done within Waltham Abbey and Ongar that have been successful already, and that's focusing into what we're doing. We did, with our previous reports, produce a schedule of things that needed to be done. As we move forward, it'll be the same things. We all were already highlighted that it may not be that Paul alone is sufficient project management capability to run all this, and we have already budgeted for that capability to assist him in that. But I really wouldn't want to be sitting here telling, for example, the Broadway that they are being deprioritized to be the last one to come forward because we're concentrating on the other places. I think it is important that we treat our district fairly. And as Councillor Lyon knows from our last overview and scrutiny meeting, I did highlight that we are still looking in the future at rolling this out to our larger villages as well. We are having a pause on that just at the moment for exactly the reasons Councillor Lyon mentioned. We don't want to take on too much. We're looking at guidance from you as a committee, and when this comes to Cabinet as well, about the relative prioritisation of things. But it comes back to what I was saying at the beginning. We're looking initially at the quick wins, things that we can do quickly to make things better. The longer term things naturally will involve more expense, but will also involve a wider group of people needing to be involved to make them a success, and it has to be done as something that is bought into. I've used that word before, but it has to be bought into by the various town centres as being things that they want to happen, because we're not in a position to have either the resources or the finance to do things to town centres. It has to be that collaborative working. Paul, I don't know if you want to highlight one or two of the things that have been successful.
Good evening. Yeah, there is a lot of repetition in the reports, you're quite right, and a lot of repetition is on the quick win stuff. And the idea really is to make town centres look as attractive as possible so people want to be there. We want to try and get the footfall back into the towns. So yeah, there is a lot of repetition because we've got the same sort of things going on to try and get the people back in as quickly as we can. As far as Waltham Abbey is concerned and Ongar and the learnings that are coming from there, I mean, Waltham Abbey is actually quite a good starting point as a town because they've got an active town council, they've got an active town partnership, and they're quite keen to get things done and get things moving. We've formed a small town team there at the moment, which consists of the clerk from the town council, one of the town councillors, the chairman of the town partnership, and myself. And we're now meeting to actually set some priorities and work out how we're going to achieve those priorities. So we're using the report as a format and then going to set the priorities from there. As Councillor Phillips said, this teamwork, this buy-in from the ground is really important. You know, the people who know the town best are the town councils and the town partnerships, the people who work and live in those town centres. So yeah, we need their input and we need their buy-in to it as well. And not everything is a district council job. Some of it is town council job, some of it is down to the businesses. One issue we are finding is that a lot of the retailers are not terribly involved in town partnership and tend to keep themselves to themselves quite a bit. Using my retail experience, I know that retailers need to change a little bit at the moment. We're living in a changing world, the market's changed. You can't just have your shop, open your front door and wait for people to walk in. You've actually got to go out and get your business now. And a lot of retailers still haven't learnt that. And certainly in the smaller towns, like Epping Forest has, where you've got a lot of independents, a lot of self-employed people, they haven't got the push of a group of companies or a franchise or a brand. They've got to do it off their own back. So there's some learning to be done. But Waltham Abbey is certainly probably the best town, I would have thought, from the ones I looked at, to actually get things moving and see if we can make it work and where we can use our learnings in the other areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just picking up on one point about the small businesses and not having the same backing behind them as the larger companies. I've been aware throughout this pandemic that a lot of small shopkeepers have been very creative in reality in the way in which they've managed to advertise themselves, to put themselves more into the awareness, raise the awareness of their particular shops within the local community. I just wonder whether, perhaps with thinking it the wrong way around, that they are already doing it, a lot of them, but yes, there are others who will not be.
If I may just add to that, I know from experience in Loughton, not throughout the rest of the district, but from events that the town council has put on, like the Christmas lights and things like that, my fellow Loughton Town councillors will bear me out, I think, on this. Basically, it's the large chains which haven't engaged as actively as the small independents. Quite simply, they are governed by head office, and head office says no. It's as simple as that. Or, in the case of Loughton, the owner of the building says, no, thou shalt not attach a Christmas tree or Christmas lights or Christmas decorations to it. So we're very much controlled by those larger businesses.
I've got Councillor Rackham, Councillors Wixley, Whitehouse, Heap and Bannett in that order. So if I can go to Councillor Rackham. Oh, sorry, Councillor Murray. You were the first one on my list and I missed you there. Councillor Murray first and then I'll come to Councillor Rackham.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got quite a lot to say, so probably if you want, divide me into two, because I'll make my comments about the Broadway first and then let other people speak, and then my comments about Loughton High Road. And the reason why I want to speak about both is that my current ward, which I've represented for a long time, is a kind of more Loughton High Road ward, but my first 16 years on the council was Loughton Broadway ward. So I do know the Broadway very well, so that's what I want to focus on first of all. I am glad, and we were promised it, thank you Councillor Phillip, that the reports understand the difference between the High Road and the Broadway. I will say in my later contribution that I don't quite think it's got the spirit of the High Road right, but I'll explain that later. I will just say by way of introduction, 2 points. I've only had one read of this because we did, I'm not blaming anyone in the current situation, but we did only get this on Friday afternoon. I did have other political activities organised for the bulk of the weekend, so I only read this yesterday. So I want these to be my kind of preliminary remarks. I've had no opportunity to consult with any residents or any groups that I'm in close contact with. So these are my kind of initial comments. I will just say by way of controversy, not that I deliberately look for controversy, but it's the first time that I've actually seen in writing that EFDC recognise that the retail park has had an undoubted impact on the Broadway. Some of us said from the very beginning that that's exactly what would happen, and our previous portfolio holder, who is no longer on the council, said no, that wouldn't happen. The impact on the Broadway from the retail park would be very minimal. We've now got it in black and white that there's undoubtedly been an impact, and in fact there's an explanation, isn't there? The retail park was meant to be fashion-led, and we're given these statistics now that in reality that never happened. 3 out of the 12 outlets are only 3 out of the 12 are fashion-based. But having said that, I'll accept the report in the spirit that it's written. So if I look at some of the recommendations, I don't think anyone can have any problem with the quick wins that, as outlined on page 12. I am tempted to say, to be honest, that EFDC and the Essex County Council should be doing those things anyway. I can't see anything there in those quick wins that shouldn't be just part of routine expenditure. That's what we pay for our council tax. We pay our council tax for basic things like that. Apart from obviously the comment on parking charges, all those other things should be doing anyway. And I do know, and perhaps Councillor Wixley knows more about it than I do because I'm not directly involved, the Broadway Town Centre Partnership has been trying to encourage something about the central reservation for a long time. Right, the recommendations, if I just go to them by number, 1, 2 and 3. Have absolutely no problem with those recommendations, Chairman, apart from exactly what number 2 means in reality. I completely agree, so I'm looking at the recommendations on page 13, members. I completely agree that this has to be a kind of cross-group approach. The Parish Council, the District Council, Essex Highways, getting them to do something, I wish you luck. businesses, community groups. I fully accept that. I do just have some concern about the way the recommendation is written. Yes, obtain Loughton Town Council commitment to the scheme. I don't quite know what in reality providing leadership means, because I'm not sure that we've got the staffing at parish level to provide the leadership. I know that staffing at our town council is very, very tight, and we're struggling to implement the major projects that we want to implement anyway, that no one else will implement, like playgrounds and community things and recreational things. So I don't have a problem with number 2 in one sense. It just depends exactly what it means, because I'm not sure that any parish can provide leadership. I'm not sure they've got the staff and capability to do that, but perhaps that can be touched on. Didn't have any problems on those, going through them, because I've got to scroll through them because we didn't get a printed copy, and I understand why. I was interested exactly what number 15 was about. Consider reinstating the 4 flagpoles to the flats above Brick Clamps Path, together with any other original details. I thought that was interesting, but I didn't quite know what that meant. Absolutely, as regards the town centre manager, those are 2, that's a key organisation to work with, Debden Traders Association. I was pleased to see the proposal about a shuttle bus park and ride service on page 16 between the Broadway and Epping Forest Retail Park. Okay, I think all the proposals on page 18, number 24 to 28 rather, are a given. They make considerable sense. And then some interesting recommendations, 29 to 32 on page 18. I think those are the key partnerships that you should be looking at. I think that Craig Loughton has an interesting track record and some considerable expertise that could be put forward, particularly in the encouragement of small businesses and entrepreneurial setups. The recommendations as regards the community hub, page 19, and I know there's some talk about the community hub based in the remodelled housing office on the Broadway. I do think that's a good idea, but I think that's a really, really important recommendation, 36. You're liaising with the Oakwood Hill Community Centre. Though that's some way away from the Broadway, they've got the experience of having run a community hub on the Broadway for many years. And in fact, the chairman of the Broadway Town Centre Partnership is the person who ran that for the Restore community. The St John's shop, I think it's called St John's on the Broadway, is relatively new, so it is important that we talk to them. But in terms of bringing previous experience, it's the people behind the Oakwood Hill Community Centre and the chairman of the Town Centre Partnership. Right, 42, put in place free Wi-Fi within the Broadway and publicise. I think that will be useful. All of those, in perhaps attracting a slightly younger profile to use the Broadway. 45, working with New City College. That is important. I think we do have to welcome the college as part of the Broadway. I'm not sure that it is always welcomed at the moment, but the reality is that the New City College Epping Forest campus is going to be there for a considerable time, I would have thought. They're getting enough capital value from the former Luckton's Field. I don't see them selling the site for even more capital value. Hopefully not, anyway. I think that was everything that I wanted to say about the Broadway. Cycling's interesting, page 28. yes, you can make cycling more accessible in the sense of having somewhere when you reach the Broadway to put your bikes, but to be honest, I'm not sure anyone in their right mind would want to cycle on the certainly on the main roads to arrive at the Broadway, and that's a real problem. And until we get some county money behind that, and we see some projects in Epping Forest like they do, we have in Chelmsford and Colchester, which is I think the areas where they've done their biggest schemes. I don't think in reality that's really going to happen, because you have to be a pretty risk-averse type of person to want to cycle on the main roads in Loughton. I think the recommendations about parking are always going to be quite controversial, and I would like certainly some soundings and consultation about those recommendations before even agreeing with them. And I think that's what I want to say on the Broadway, Madam Chairman, but if I can come back later about the High Road, I think that's fairer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. I'm just going to pull up on one that you read, one a different way perhaps in which I read it, the idea of a shuttle bus park and ride service between the Broadway and Epping Forest Retail Park, the idea that there would be free complimentary parking and the riding service, bus service. I can just imagine people taking up parking spaces that were then not available for Broadway users, and also that they would literally just get on the bus, go to the shopping park and come back again. But that was my reading of it. Obviously, you know, each thing can be seen in different ways. Councillor Phillip, you wanted to come back on that as well?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think it's probably best because Councillor Murray had a number of points to raise. I appreciate the fact he said he wouldn't normally want to raise controversy, but sometimes that's the way it comes across, Councillor Murray. I think one of the things I do want to just pick you up on is that these were independent reports commissioned from an independent consultant. So things that are said in it are not said by EFDC. Short-term parking, as Councillor Murray knows, we did have the 20p for 2.5 hours throughout the recovery from the pandemic. We're returning to 20p for half an hour, which is in general sufficient for short-term shopping parking. I would just flag up that Paul has already talked to the Highways portfolio holder at Essex County Council, so we have set up that communication between Essex County Highways and our economic development team. I think the recommendation he spent quite a lot of time on in terms of leadership, it doesn't say the leaders, it says leadership, and you can have multiple people showing leadership. I think it's key that we have buy-in from those major stakeholders and showing the leadership. He did then talk about a number of projects that Loughton Town Council has got on, and unfortunately I have to say to him that this is possibly a case of priorities, both for the Loughton Town Council and for ourselves, in terms of balancing what things need to be done first and can be done first. It comes back to Councillor Lyon's point. It is projects and priorities, and we need to be clear about them. And things like the shuttle bus may be something that Loughton Town Council would like to fund, and we could work with them in terms of the contacts we have with the community transport to make something like that happen. But that's, I think, what we need to look into as we go forward in these. These are ideas around areas that we could actually move things forward. And it does have to be a case of looking at which ones are our priorities to do, because we cannot do them all, and we cannot do them all straight away. And indeed, some of the recommendations may actually conflict with each other. We have to decide which ones need to be done. And that's why we need to have these teams working together to make it successful. And that's why we've got Paul here as the Town Centre Project Manager, that once we have that plan, to make sure that the various people who've signed up to doing things actually will be doing those. So yes, I take on board what Councillor Murray is saying, and I welcome his strong endorsement of many of the things that are already in this report. If there are other things, I would encourage him, as he thinks of them, to send them into myself and the economic development team. This is coming to Cabinet, so we do have plenty of time to get those forward. And I'm happy to see that a lot of the things that were in here are things that have concerned Councillor Murray as well, and that reassures me that maybe we haven't missed too much by not specifically talking to him before it came to this committee.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Rackham.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Before lockdown, we had our select task and finish panel on high streets, which was really, really good. And we were really making progress on that. I hope that's something that we may hopefully reintroduce now we're coming out of lockdown, because I'd really like to see that, because I think we could really shape the district going forward. I totally agree with you that we're going to need an experience to get people back to the high street. And I was wondering, like, the looking at the high street in the future, will we be looking at a nighttime economy? And by that, I don't just mean with the hospitality sector, I mean with all the other shops. So obviously longer shopping hours, perhaps themed evenings, stuff like that. And I wondered if you have any thoughts on that, please.
Okay. Yes, I think shopping has got to change. You know, the 9 to 5 days of shopping have gone. Shops will tend to start to open later and they will close later, and things need to be more experience driven. There's got to be something to entice people into the shops. It could be demonstrations, it could be a number of things other than just having your shop door open and waiting for someone to come in. And it could be that the town has things going on which brings people into the town centres and the shops benefit from that. So, yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, high streets, as we know now, are going to change dramatically. And you know, places like, you know, I said about Loughton High Road's got 160 shops on it. There's no way Loughton High Road's going to survive with 160 shops. So we need to work out where the core of the high street's going to be and how we're going to keep that core and make it an attractive place for people to go. And yeah, and part of that, keeping that attractiveness and things, is putting on them things which are going to bring people out at different hours when they're at home maybe and not at work, you know, weekends. You know, we were talking about Ongar, but it's got a railway that brings in, well, pre-pandemic, 45, 50,000 people a year, and mainly at weekends, whereas Ongar on the whole is closed on a Sunday. There's hardly any shops open at all, so you've got all these people coming off a train and nothing to do. So there's got to be some tie-up to pull the two together. So there's something going on in the town when the people come into it. So, yes. And sorry, one thing I just have to the last comment about the flagpoles on Debden Broadway. When that was built, it had 4 fantastic flagpoles in the middle section by Bricklamps Path. And it looked absolutely amazing. And I just think, I mean, I love the Broadway. I think it's a fantastic piece of architecture. And I think those flagpoles should be brought back. That's it.
Mr. Houston?
Yeah, just to say, to totally agree with the point you're making. We don't want this to sound all doom and gloom, because it really, really isn't. We've got a great offer locally, and we've been having discussions with other places that their prosperity was factored on massive anchors like Debenhams and John Lewis and other ones. And I think what we're seeing now, the anchor in a high street is its variety, not its sameness, and that's what makes people want to go to somewhere. I think we're also looking at supporting businesses that are based in traditional buildings to also trade online, so their shop is always open, so they can always generate business. And we've already got Click It Local deployed in our district. We're currently commissioning Loyal Free, which is an app to allow local businesses to promote themselves, but also to do trails around their towns, or you can have a jazz trail, or a shop or restaurants welcoming dogs trail, just stuff that you can use to promote your place as a place that's different, to drag that in. But we're learning as we go, and I think the idea of trading longer, trading further out into the pavement, enabling people to have that sort of cafe approach, but not impinging on safety or people's ability to get around. It's never easy, but I think we're looking at changing the dynamic of the high streets, and it will evolve over a period of years. So I think we're starting now to look at this and provide support together to answer some of those questions with the people in each area, because they know what needs to be done first and best.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wixley?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was actually caught out on this. I've only I didn't realise that we had this extra item on the agenda. I think other people might have been caught out as well because it was so late. So I think I first became aware that we had this extra item yesterday, and thanks to Adrian, he's actually downloaded it for me. And I started looking at it at 5 to 3 this afternoon, so I can't, I would have liked more time to look at it, but I'd like to refer, when I looked through the first section on the Broadway, it did bring a lot of things back to me. It's quite sort of nostalgic, really, because such a lot I identified with. And I'm in 100% agreement with what Mr. Messenger just said about the Broadway, which is referred to on page 14. And I certainly believe it should get a preservation order. And the reason I feel like that is because it says it's a striking development, an example of 1950s architecture. Well, I'm a child of the 1950s. I grew up then, and I can remember going with my best friend and our two mums to Debden Broadway, and in the 1950s there was a thing called milk bars. And the big treat was, for me, was to have a milkshake there. And that happened quite a bit. I really enjoyed the milkshake experience. That particular premises is now an Indian restaurant. Nothing against Indian restaurants, but I got a yearning for the milk bars to come back. So it was. I found it quite interesting to read that. I disagreed with the report on the parking in the Broadway because when the last enhancement took place, I think some parking spaces were lost, which I think may have been to the detriment of the shopkeepers there. You know, it's much better if you've got more parking there where people can pull up for a few minutes, nip into a shop or maybe a couple of shops and then get back in the car and off they go again. Because there is a problem with people parking on the pavements there. It's people often complain about the danger of that, so I think that needs to be tackled. It's quite a serious issue. On the central reservation, that's also an item which is supposed to be being tackled by the local highways panel. But they've got such a lot of items on that local highways panel to be attended to. If the central reservation could be dealt with in some other way, it would be most welcome. I agree with the comment that Councillor Murray just made about the retail park and the original idea that it would be fashion-led. I was never convinced that it would be, and I'm quite pleased to have been proved right. I got a bit of a look at the items on the High Road, Loughton High Road, and I just say there's no longer a Loughton Highways Town Centre Partnership. That's now defunct. And I think one of the reasons is for the very reasons that you mentioned, Chairman, that there's a lot of chain stores there, and well, it may have been that the Vice Chairman said this, and they're governed by head office, so weren't interested in taking part on the High Road Town Centre Partnership. But I think my question is, when is this going to go forward to the town councils and the other bodies which are mentioned for consultation?
Thank you. So it's where it is in its time frame, really, initially. Councillor Phillip?
For this report is for it to come to Cabinet for us to discuss it there. That will then set the boundaries of what it is that we're aiming to achieve. In terms of consultation with the Town Council, I think Mr Messenger also already made it clear that he has spoken to Town Council, and I'm sure he has spoken to the Loughton Town Council already, so that's already in progress. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with everything that Councillor Wixley said. I know some of the challenges we've had with this particular building due to it being listed, so we have to be sensitive to what we do with a conservation area, and I know that there are various places that have been put forward as conservation areas within the district that they haven't made that yet. So we do have to, as I say, look at this in the whole. I think the other thing I would say about the Epping Forest Shopping Park is that we must not forget that the existence of the Epping Forest Shopping Park is one of the reasons why we can actually continue to offer all the services that we have done within our budget at the moment. Without the money that was coming in from the shopping centre, we would have had a very, very much worse situation when we came to setting our budget in February this year. We can't always achieve exactly what we want, but given the existence of the shopping park, given that it's there, given that it's fully tenanted, given that the Broadway is basically fully tenanted as well, we have a thriving economy there that is doing significant stuff for our district and for our residents through the shopping centre, shopping park. And we need to make sure that we support the shopping park and the Broadway centre, and that's what this report is about, trying to drive that forward and make them both more successful.
Thank you for those comments. Sorry, I was just going to make a comment myself around, and I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but the central reservation area, when the refurbishment work was done at the Broadway some years ago, the issue arose that the utilities were too close to the surface to be able to put in the amount of greenery that they were planning at that time. And I think this is something that's got to be brought in mind as well as to where things are and what can be done with what's underneath the surfaces.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. The central reservation, there are plans underway at the moment to do something about that. So that's being talked about and plans have been drawn up. So that is happening. The town partnership in Loughton, I spoke to the chairman and the treasurer, and the town partnership does sit there and form, and they're happy to pick it up and run with it again. But they just need a bit of direction and support in doing that. So that's something that we're planning to do. And yes, the other thing on the shopping park, I mean, whatever you think about a shopping park, it brings a lot of people into that part of Loughton. And what we've got to work out how to do is to get some of those people from that shopping park into the Broadway, and take advantage of a number of people and the footfall that's going down to that part of Loughton. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm assuming when you're talking about town centre partnership, you're talking about the High Road.
Sorry, yes, the High Road partnership, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. I've seen the report only this evening, so these are very, very preliminary comments that I'm making. It's just about the Epping part of the report. It says that it's been produced after extensive consultation. I'm one of the Epping councillors, but I haven't been involved, and I do hope that, as it says, there will be consultation in the future with local members, that I will be involved in the future. One of the comments is about the uniformity of shop fronts. That's been discussed in the past. Personally, I don't agree with that. I think one of the attractions of Epping High Street is the fact that we have some rather sort of old world and different sort of shop fronts. I mean, they need to be good condition, but I wouldn't like to see uniformity of the shop front. And I hope that when this goes out to consultation to residents, which Councillor Phillips just referred to, that's something that we will find out what other people feel about that. You mentioned in the report about the residential development and the leisure and cinema bringing a greater need for parking. I mean, that is something that I and my colleagues have been saying for ages. Whether anything can be done about it now at this late stage of the planning for the new sites, I've no idea. It'd be interesting to hear what the Cabinet says, but it's something that many residents have been highlighting, and we have too. You talk about the improved bus services. We actually have quite a lot of bus services that come into the station, but people just don't know about them. They're not well advertised, they're not integrated. It's quite difficult to find out where the bus is going to. So yes, I think improved bus awareness of the bus services would be really important. You also mentioned about e-scooters, which you quite like. I think it was a great fun to use one. I'm not sure what the rules are that have to go on the road, but I would just highlight the fact that there's a lot of concern among residents about their safety. There's been a very nasty accident in the High Street where someone was hospitalised, and many older people in particular have said how concerned they are about these scooters that are weaving in and out on the pavement. So if they're on the road, great, but if they're on the pavements, not so sure. You mentioned in the report about market-driven adaptive use compared to planning-determined look. I just wondered what that was, so that's one of my questions. If you could just explain what market-driven adaptive use is compared to planning determined. Yeah, I think that will do for now. So thank you.
Thank you. Who's going to take that? Councillor Phillip.
Mr Messenger, take that last question. My initial reaction to that is market-driven rather than planning-driven means that your planning committee is not going to have any control over what actually happens there. A couple of things about consultation. As I said in my kick-off remarks, these were done during the lockdown period, and we tried to do a slice across the various consultation areas. Clearly, we can't and wouldn't hit everybody at that time. The consultation I refer to is as we have decided, once we've decided what we're doing, we'll be working with the stakeholders, which, as I said, were the businesses and the town and parish councils, as we take this forward to make sure that we've got the right things happening. This is not a document that will go out to the public for consultation. That's not the intent here. And just picking up on Councillor Whitehouse's comments about e-scooters, we are very limited in terms of e-scooters. E-scooters are not allowed on the pavements. They're currently not allowed in the roads either in this area. Currently, it's under trials with the government. Some areas in London have are taking part in those trials and can have e-scooters that are limited, that are rented only. They're not personally owned ones, and they're limited in terms of their power and therefore their speed. Clearly, scooters on the pavement in Epping are an issue around this area and are being looked at, and I know Councillor Holly Whitbread has raised this with a number of people, and we do need to make sure that those happen and enforcement against them are taking place in the right direction. It's something the Cabinet is aware of, and we will be looking at going forward in terms of how we enforce against things where we have power to do. But the exact definitions of market-driven, I think I'll leave that to Mr Messenger.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehouse. I think you may have caught me out butchering the English language, for which I'm eternally shameful. I think that phrase may have been something that should have been whittled out at an early draft, because I'm not entirely sure what it means myself on reflection. But I think the major point is that what's been happening through the pandemic is a freeing up of a lot of the constraints that were on trade and adaptation and evolution on high street offers. And I think that's what we're going to have to live with going forward. And I think that we need to work with our colleagues in planning and our neighbours and all the other partners to try and work out how we wish to try and guide that process going forward, even if we don't have a legislative framework in order to do it. We might be able to achieve an outcome through consultation and liaison with investors and shareholders as well. So my apologies for that phrase. I will go home and dunk my head. The other thing I was going to mention, which I think, Paul, you may have flagged somewhere in the reports, is one of the major opportunities we have as a place is we have a major out commute. And many of those people that were previously working in London 5 days a week may now find themselves working from home a few days a week. That means that spend is now still in the district, and the 20-minute neighbourhood may enable them to go up and visit the town centre, get something to eat, go and do a bit of shopping in a way that money would have previously been spent in Liverpool Street and around the city. So as well as challenges, there are real opportunities for us to get things right and trying to cater and respond to that new marketplace, which would have important environmental impacts because people could stroll more to the local town centre or cycle, and that might make a big difference for us going forward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Heap.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the report to Mr Messenger. I think it's fantastic. Certainly not doom and gloom. I think this is a great thing. And since the consultation was done on this, there has been a change at the Parish Council in Buckerstill. I'm focusing on Buckerstill. And it certainly chimes with a lot of what we're thinking about and hoping to achieve, although I hope that doesn't deter any former parish councillors from chipping in with their opinions. Local independent shops are the way forward because 75% of a pound spent in a local independent shop stays in the district. A chain, maybe 45%, so they're not great things to have. I think what we... sorry, just in that report, there was a mention of the library in Buckhurst Hill, and that is problematic because it's owned by ECC and requires an awful lot of money to repair it. From what Councillor Phillips was saying at the beginning, is this going to be a case that a parish council, if it were getting itself organised to have leadership and all that kind of thing, would it be applying for grants from EFDC? Or how would that money become available, or will it be tailored? We do need to get a lot of impetus about this, I think, coming out of the pandemic. And we would be keen, certainly BHPC would be keen to do whatever we can to get this going. And in terms of making the streets more attractive and experiential, we need to have a much greater artistic sensibility. Apart from that, it's all good.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really hoping, actually, that rather than coming to EFDC for grants, these organisations will be looking for external sources of funding. As I said, what we're looking at here is a partnership. That doesn't mean that we won't be putting in money. I sincerely hope it doesn't mean that Buckhurst Hill Parish Council won't be putting in money. I would hope that the businesses that are benefiting from this in Buckhurst Hill will also be putting in money, but there are sources of money out there, and perhaps working as a partnership rather than individual local government organisations, we can be more successful in applying for those external grants and making it happen. As I said at the beginning, I fully expect not all of these things and all of these reports will be able to be delivered over the next couple of years. There's too much there. It's going to cost too much. That's why we have to decide as partnerships of what the priorities are. And I was not surprised to hear Councillor Heap talking about artistic improvement. I think that possibly applies to places other than Buckhurst Hill as well, but it's key that we need to make sure that we are able to meet in our high streets all our residents' desires for what they're getting out of it. Some people will be going for those local shops. Some people actually, for good reasons, to them, prefer the chains. Some people want to just frequent the coffee shops or public houses. Some people will appreciate artistic input and some people will not. So it's making sure that we have something in there for everyone, because that's the way we'll keep our high streets vibrant and growing.
Councillor Heap, you want to come back quickly?
Yes, by artistic input, what I mean is appreciating what's around. So in the case of the Broadway itself is a fantastic piece of architecture, and the flagpoles would improve it, and that is an artistic sensibility. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett?
Thank you, Chair. I do echo what's been said. I would often spend my lunchtimes in the city, and now I'm working in the district, and I spend my lunchtimes now in the district. So, this is really welcomed. And actually, one of the questions I did have has been answered, but I guess my follow-up question is, what does success look like? Of course, for example, free Wi-Fi in the town centre, it's quite clear. If you can connect with your mobile phone, you've achieved that recommendation. But, some of the other recommendations, for example, helping retailers with an online presence or trying to push out certain marketing objectives or advertising objectives, who decides whether we've met the objective, and what does meeting that objective look like?
Thank you. Who's going to take that one?
I'll take off first.
I think it's passing the buck by the looks of it.
No, I'll take that one first. I know Mr. Messenger wants to put some things in as well. I'm interested because I personally am dead against free Wi-Fi in town centres. I don't believe it makes economic sense for us as a council. I don't think it's something that in general people will use. I know that there are significant challenges around security of those, and I think that may be one that Mr. Messenger and I disagree on. But in terms of success, that's one of the things that we need to do as we work these plans. When we were drawing up the initial things for Waltham Abbey and Ongar, we had a project plan with the things that we needed to achieve and how we were going to achieve them. So some of them may be very difficult to measure, because how do you measure the satisfaction of people on a high street? If we can keep our high streets vibrant, If we increase the footfall, if we make more people able to use our high streets, then that is a measure of success. Increasing some of it, and I think Mr. Houston referred to this, Click It Local, the number of businesses that we've had sign up to it, as we roll out the other things that we've identified from that online presence in terms of the local loyalty stuff, for example. People using that is a measure of success. And that does come down to each and every one of us as individual councillors. If we have things that are used like Click It Local, I'd be very surprised if every single councillor around the table here has already been on Click It Local and looked to see what's there. I know I have, but I suspect a lot of others haven't. These things will benefit our businesses only if we use it, and that's where we have to remember that we as councillors are leaders. We need to be using it, we need to be telling our residents about it, we need to be encouraging our shops and businesses to sign up and make use of this. We've bought this in for our businesses to make them more successful, but if our businesses don't know about it, then it doesn't do what it needs to. And the best way of that is for us as councillors to be in those businesses, tell them about it. We as an economic development department send around a monthly newsletter. If your businesses aren't signed up to that, get them into that, because it tells them all these useful things. It tells them about the grants that are available as well. It helps to buy into all of this. That's where we as councillors can really make a difference on this one and drive things forward.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Jennings, Councillor Baldwin and Councillor Murray had indicated earlier that he did want to come back and has so indicated. So if I can go first to Councillor Jennings.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to say that obviously I didn't receive this report until today, and I didn't start to read it until I finished my afternoon meeting at about 4:30. So I was quite annoyed, really, and I'll state my annoyance that a subject as important as this has been given so little time for members to properly consider. I think literally hours. I know that some people have received this on Friday afternoon, but I think this is probably one of the most important projects that this council has tackled in a long while, and it will certainly affect each and every one of our residents across the district. And for that, I think basically it should have been given a lot more time for members to consider properly. That said, I noticed in the report which I read was both Loughton Broadway and Loughton High Road that Loughton Town Council and their councillors had been consulted, so I understand, but not the ward councillors, the people that are elected to the district council to serve the interests of not only residents but the traders and businesses within their wards. Now I know that my wife, who represents with Councillor Kaufman both sides of the High Road and a substantial part of that High Road, has asked to be consulted on many occasions, but that has never ever materialised. So I would ask that this now includes consultation with the ward members at the earliest opportunity, as well as the town council involved. I've worked in a number of London boroughs, and obviously town centre regeneration is not new. It's been tackled by many councils over many years, and I see that Epping Forest is in danger of slipping into what I see as a fairly unambitious position. It's very easy to get new benches, new planters, new street lamps, but these are they're just literally the dressing. What we actually need is better shops, because that is the thing that actually brings people to the area to shop. So they need good access to get to the shopping area, they need a good environment when they're there, and they need shops that reflect their aims and aspirations. And I was pleased to see in the report that was put forward that obviously in regard to Loughton High Road, a lot of the shops are at the same sort of level, if you like. They meet the aims and aspirations of certain parts of our community, but they're not meeting other parts of that. So I'd like to see more sort of emphasis on that, certainly. The other thing that I've noticed here, that the council is, I think, being very unambitious in terms of it does have input that could really make an impact on the high street. First of all, it's what every shopkeeper always says is, I want free parking, preferably right outside my shop and for my customers only. The second thing is that I'd like my rents lowered. Well, that's beyond most of the shops in terms of reducing landlords in reducing those rents, because they're private landlords, and that's beyond our control. But of course, we've got to remember that in Loughton High Road, the council has purchased Centric Parade, so it does have that control over what rates and rents those shops attract. It can, at its own cost, admittedly, but as far as I'm aware, it can contribute, if you like, to the rateable costs of those properties and other properties, as other councils have done, basically to help start-ups, to get new blood into the high street, not to go away from the, if you like, the same old shop, you know, loads of this, loads of that, to get a blend in. So I think that's what we need to do. We need to be much, much more ambitious, and I think the council has it in its power to certainly offer free parking. Loughton, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have any free parking, whereas Epping does, and that really galls with Loughton residents. The other thing is, obviously, the council can reduce its rate, reduce the rateable cost to help start-ups, and it could reduce the rents, certainly on the Broadway, to help those businesses start to thrive and not just tick over, but certainly they could do that in Centric Parade. This happens with a lot of other councils where they are actively promoting getting new, if you like, blood into the high street. The comments I know that have been made about sort of the proposal about the one design shop, this seems to work very, very well in small parades of shops. Not a large parade such as can be found in Chigwell Village, but say the parade of shops in Grange Hill, that sort of thing. I've recently been down and inspected a scheme in Poole in Dorset where the council has done exactly this, and it looks very good. What the council has also done is dictated what businesses go into that shop. So they're not opening up to the market, they're saying we want these sorts of businesses. And again, I think the council can take a much more active role in that, in determining what businesses, I beg your pardon, actually go into shops like at Centric Parade. Thank you.
A lot of various thoughts within that. Councillor Phillip, you wanted to come back?
I have to fundamentally disagree on a vast number of them. I do apologise for the timing. It was emailed out that there wasn't a supplementary agenda to all members in the middle of Friday afternoon. So that was out to everyone at that point and published obviously on mod.gov as well at the same time. I actually disagree with them around dictating what shops go into particular buildings. We have made a significant financial investment in the Centric Parade, plus other parts, other addresses in the Loughton High Road, Councillor Wixie, so I'm not going to just fall into that trap. But we have made a significant investment there, and it is our responsibility for our residents to make sure that those investments pay off sensibly. I don't think we're in the business of actually dictating what shops our residents should be shopping in. So changing rents to do that, I'm not sure is a good move. I don't actually believe we are being unambitious. There are a lot of recommendations covering a lot of things for a lot of town centres. Some of them, the quick wins, are naturally cosmetic. That's one of the things that allows them to be quick wins. That's why we're looking at the overall drive of things. So the shops in various places are driven by what people want to shop in that place. We cannot force our residents to shop at a different quality of shop just because we think that's the better thing for the high road. We have to try and encourage people to move in the right direction, and it's not something I think that we as a council will be driving forward.
Thank you very much. And obviously, along with all of these sorts of issues, these sorts of reports, there's always going to be disagreement and views on, and that's what we're here for tonight, to express them, and hopefully some will be taken on board by the Cabinet members when they discuss it at the Cabinet meeting. Councillor Baldwin.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just being specific about Loughton Broadway, that I have felt for a long time that Burton Road, which is a two-way at the moment, should be converted to one-way traffic in the direction of Sainsbury's. And that would serve, I think, that would help with another idea, which I was disappointed was not mentioned in the report, which would be to pedestrianise the Broadway, because that's already been partially done. I mean, the central reservation is very narrow. The roads there are also been narrowed to restrict traffic, and I think that if we were to more fully pedestrianise the Broadway and route traffic going towards in one direction down to Vere Road, in the other direction along Burton Road, and keep traffic away from the Broadway, that would also have the added benefit of solving the parking problem, which is a big problem. People parking, putting their cars through the bollards, parking on the pavements. That is a very, very big problem. And so I was disappointed that was not mentioned in the report. Now, I do feel if it were more fully pedestrianised, maybe there could be a through route for delivery vehicles that would facilitate people coming back, maybe some cultural offerings there, but that was something that I would certainly propose. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Pedestrianisation hasn't really been mentioned that much, although it is referenced at various points in the report. We have seen examples in the past in the district itself where pedestrianisation was not a particularly successful outcome for Waltham Abbey. And I know of other places within the wider area where pedestrianisation has taken place, and in some places has had to be reverted back to some transport being allowed through. So it is something which would have to be looked at very, very carefully. I'm sure it would be something that perhaps, though, will come up again as we go forward with the discussions around this. So I've got Councillor Murray and Councillor Lee, did you want to come back on that point at this point in time? Can you just put your microphone on?
Yes, I wouldn't advise you to pedestrianise at all, because Waltham Abbey was killed the day they pedestrianised it. I never ever understood why they did it, because Waltham Cross did it a couple of years before and it died. So then, Waltham Abbey did it, killed the street, Hoddesdon did it, now Hoddesdon have reopened their road. Unless you've got traffic coming through, whether it's just one way or not, you have no business. There is nothing in Waltham Abbey, and I've lived there for 70 years, and that used to be so busy, so thriving. But if there's no traffic, the cars don't know, people don't know what's there, so I wouldn't advise pedestrianisation. And I really don't know what you've done in Waltham Abbey apart from the community hub, because I don't know, can't see anything else that's been done, so I'm very sorry about that. But I've lived there practically all my life.
So thank you for those comments. And if I can finally, as Councillor Murray did indicate he would like to come back, and so if I can just go back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm aware of the hour, so I'll restrict myself to 3 comments. I do want to just go back to the Broadway, please, because there was an important issue that I missed and no one else has picked up. Page 19, 3.8, library. I understand when this was written, but I think developments have made this an even better recommendation on page 20, recommendation 37. The proposed deal with New City College in terms of actually them running the library fell quite a few months ago, so that isn't going to happen. I think a really positive thing for the Broadway, and this report kind of suggests it, and a really positive thing for Debden Library and its usage would be to see the Broadway, the library return to the Broadway. It's on the right side of Rectory Lane and that so-called improved junction. And I wondered, after I've made my other 2 comments, whether the Leader of Council can update us on anything as regards steps towards that, because he did have a Zoom meeting with myself and Councillor Chris Pond, so I would be interested in that. And then as regards Loughton, I'll restrict myself to 2 remarks, because there's a lot I could say, but I can say that on other occasions. I've reread page 33 again, and I may have misinterpreted it, but I think you've slightly misunderstood the catchment area for the high road. I accept as a general statement that its catchment area is likely to be more affluent and have a higher rate of disposable income than the immediate catchment area of the Broadway. All the census indicators would suggest that would be an accurate statement to make. But I don't think the catchment area for the High Road is quite as affluent as this report seems to think. There are very affluent sections, but my ward isn't a particularly affluent ward around Valley Hill, parts of Loughton, and they would instinctively see the High Road as the shopping centre, or the High Road they would certainly walk to use, and also parts of Alton Ward and parts of St Mary's Ward aren't as affluent as I think this report kind of suggests. Because one of the comments I very often get, and I have to say it's a comment I agree with as well, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily right, but I do agree with it, but I get it from a lot of people, is that a lot of the independent traders in the High Road are actually too expensive for people on medium and low incomes to use. That obviously doesn't apply to the nationals because they tend to have set prices. Actually, the mix of the High Road in terms of the independents are actually too expensive for a significant part of the catchment area. And then my final comment, and I always like to end on a really positive note and give credit where it's due. Page 39, have I got that right? Page 39, yep, outlines the role of the market since 2002 and the way that that's developed and how successful that has been and the way that that could be expanded. And I actually think that comment about expanding it and introducing new features when it comes back would be really good. But as the only district councillor in Loughton and the only town councillor in Loughton that isn't actually a member of the Loughton Residents Association, I think I can I'm in the best position to say well done to the Loughton Residents Association, who have effectively enabled this market to take place since 2002, have been the driving force behind the market, and I'm sure will be one of the driving forces in proving it. So, though I'm not keen to join them, I will say well done to the Loughton residents for nearly 20 years hard work on the market in the Loughton High Road, because people do travel miles to go to it. So well done, folks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. I shall be brief, and I think it would be only fair to mention that there are other markets, many other markets actually within the district that are also successful. But yes, I echo the idea that markets are a great way of getting people to be involved in our streets. We do have to be a little bit aware of where we can do things with highways and not. So we will look that forward. We definitely want to make sure that our streets are places where people want to come. And there is an interesting conflict between, I think, what Councillor Jennings was saying in terms of the sorts of shops that we should have on Loughton Street, High Road, and the fact that Councillor Murray is pointing out that the independents, which are the ones I think Councillor Jennings was recommending rather than the chains, are the ones that his residents are finding too expensive. I think that actually just shows the challenges that we have going forward in getting something that, rather than the local plan having something in it for everyone to hate, we want our high streets to have something in it that everybody wants to go and make use of. And that's really the aim of where we're trying to get to, and we can only do it through partnership.
Thank you very much. I'm going to throw something in at the end. I'm not looking for a response to it, but throughout the whole of this report, there is no reference whatsoever to accessibility for people with whatever disability they may have. You think about wheelchair access around pavements, if you've got too many obstacles around, equally for people with sight issues, if you've got too many benches, bollards that they're not aware of. I think that is something that is missing from this report, and needs to be given consideration to. Are you the messenger?
I sort of take that as a given, really, that if we're putting benches in and we're doing improvements to the town centres, then we're considering disability as well. So it's,
you say it's a given, but you're talking about putting an awful lot more obstacles in the way of people with those disabilities.
It's a balancing act, isn't it, between increasing footfall and yeah, it's got to be sorted out one way or the other, but there's ways it can be done.
Yeah,
successfully.
I'll just throw that one in at the end. I think we've had a good opportunity to put forward viewpoints. We've had members of the Cabinet who've had the opportunity to hear those viewpoints. I'm not sure what date this is actually going to Cabinet, but there will be that other opportunity again to be present for that and to ask and raise other questions. Councillor Murray.
Yes, sorry, I don't want to just miss it. I did ask the Leader of Council whether he had anything he could usefully add as regards developments of Debden Library and going on to the Broadway.
Chairman, obviously the Cabinet at Essex has only just reformed post-election, so I'll have conversations in the weeks ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, thank you all very much for your contribution. A very quick one.
I am aware that there is a lot of content in these reports and we haven't had a huge amount of time to look at them. So can I encourage any members of your committee, and in fact any other councillors watching us on webcast, if they've got things that they would like to raise, rather than waiting for it to come to Cabinet and raising them then, please get them into myself and Mr Houston via email. That will give us enough time to actually look at them, at least think about them before it comes to Cabinet.
Thank you very much for that. And as I say, thank you all very much for your attendance this evening. And I will close the meeting at 9:22. Thank you.